Would you think that women are treated differently than men by doctors and other workers in the healthcare system? If that's true, how would that affect patients? Our guest today has firsthand experience with that, and it almost cost her her life. Stay with us.
Welcome to Lean to the Left, home of no-holds-barred commentary, plus interviews with fascinating people, some of them top experts, others simply with interesting stories to tell. You'll never know who'll show up at Lean to the Left. Now here's your host, Bob Gaddy.
Today we welcome to Lean to the Left author Lynn Forney to discuss gender bias in healthcare, something that's more common than you might think, especially if you're a guy. In Lynn's case, after being stabbed in bed 7 times by a stranger and losing 21 pints of blood, I didn't know the human body even had that much blood in it.
It doesn't.
What'd you say? It doesn't?
It doesn't. So how they come up with that, I'm sorry to interrupt, but they add blood in and then you lose it. So it's based on all of those numbers.
Okay. That's bad. So she suffered even more trauma, though, after she went to the hospital in critical condition. Now, there's some of the people who were supposed to help her there, supposed to help her recover, both mentally and physically, actually betrayed her, including a male nurse, who we'll talk about in a minute. Lynn's the author of a new book, Choosing Survival, which describes her attack, the PTSD she suffered, and the mistreatment she endured in the hospital. Unfortunately, we find that gender bias she experienced simply because she's a woman is all too common. Lynn Forney's Choosing Survival is candid and emotional. She pulls no punches in revealing how the city of Boca Raton, Florida's police covered up violent crimes like what occurred to her, just to protect the city's glitzy reputation. But even worse was how Lynn was treated by those who were supposed to protect. They were supposed to serve vulnerable people like her. Unfortunately, this story is all too relatable for women who've experienced sexual assault and rape. Lynn, thanks for joining us on Lean to the Left and sharing your story with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, let's just start at the beginning. You were 19 when this happened?
I was 21 when I was stabbed. I was also hospitalized when I was 19 for depression.
Oh,
so
okay.
I had experienced that and then a few years later got attacked.
You don't seem too depressed today.
I have worked very hard. I have worked very hard over the last 20 plus years.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were 21 when this happens. So what happened? Take us through what happened.
Sure. So like I said, I had struggled with depression since childhood, honestly. And I went to college. I ended up taking a year off of college because I just got worse and worse. And I did a lot of therapy and even went to a hospital for depression.
Wow.
And that is where the male nurse story comes in. That's really important. But I went back to college and I've always been a dancer. I have a BFA in dance now, but I kind of went to college thinking I need to get a practical degree. Right. And I love science too. I love other things, but I just couldn't seem to shake the depression. And I think I finally came to this realization, I think dance is where I belong. It's what I love. It's something I'm super passionate about. I went to a performing arts high school even, and I changed my major to dance. And I did slowly but surely feel this lift happen. I was like, okay, I think things are looking up. For to just oversimplify, it was like, okay, I think I'm where I need to be. This is happening. And I was very lucky to have really amazing professors and friends at the time too. But I went home in between the spring and summer semester in college. And I literally went to a drugstore to work. They would let me work whenever I was home. And then I went to the mall to buy my mom a Mother's Day present. So these are the things I did when I was home. And I went to sleep. She had gone out actually with some friends. I woke up when she got home. I bought the new Tori Amos CD. So if anyone's around my age, they'll know. And she came to turn that off. She's like, oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake you up. I was like, okay. And then I immediately passed back out. And then the next time I woke up, I had these arms around my chest, essentially holding my breasts and pulling me up. I sleep on my stomach a lot. So I was being pulled up, and I felt a person on my left, and it was a man's voice that said, don't worry, I'm a friend of your mother's. And time is very strange when you're going through something like that. I had all these thoughts that I feel like happened in a nanosecond, but I also feel like time was really slow at the same time. And I just, because I did think, did my mom bring someone home? Is this really a friend? And then I immediately was like, no, there's no way. But like I said, that happened in like a nanosecond. And then I just turned and I just started flailing and screaming. I was just screaming and screaming, Mom 911, Mom 911 over and over again. And I felt this really hard jab in my lower left back side. And people do ask this question, so I'll just answer it now, that after that initial kind of jab feeling, I didn't feel anything else, but I just somehow knew, and I can't explain how I knew I was getting stabbed. And it's strange, but I just did not stop screaming and screaming. And he got up and ran out of the room, and I stood up and I looked down and there was just blood pouring just everywhere, all over the floor. And I look up and my mom comes in and I was like, a man stabbed me, call 911. And and again, this is the middle of the night. And she was kind of like, there's no man here. And I was like, just call 911. I was just so adamant about like, get the ambulance here or I'm going to die. That's it. And he had taken the phone off the hook in like the living room. And so she had to run into the living room to get the phone. And I had been talking on the floor the night before to a friend of mine. And it was a Garfield phone I really loved. I got when I was 10. So weird how these like things kind of stick with you. But I just fell to the floor to get the receiver, and I could hear her speaking to someone. And I was like, okay, thank God. And I just put the receiver down on the floor. And I just kept saying, I'm dying. Like, where are they? Where is the ambulance? I'm dying. It was just this kind of surreal. I knew exactly what was going on, and I detail it very clearly in my book. But I also was so desperate for someone to tell me what the hell was going on.
Yeah.
What is happening? Why is this happening? Why did this man do this to me? And the police, the ambulance, like the fire station was literally like on the same street as my mom's house. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I was like, why aren't they here yet? It's across the street. And I guess later on I was told they had to wait for the police to get there because it was considered a crime scene, obviously. Right. And eventually they got there, and I'll stop there so you can ask a question.
So you went to the hospital. They took you to the hospital.
Yeah.
And what happened in the hospital?
The night of, I was still, a friend of mine from like third grade laughed because she's like, that's so Lynn. Because I laugh at myself because I was just so aware and awake. And at one point a nurse was like, she needs blood. And I was like, negative AB. Like, I'm telling these people my blood type, and I'm keeping them aware of what's going on with me. And it was a horrible night that I also talk about in detail, but I felt very taken care of that immediate night with the emergency doctor and the nurses. And at one point they were trying to give me like an MRI, and I was like, I'm going to throw up. And I turned and threw up. And then I guess one of my puncture wounds opened back up, and I started bleeding all over the floor. And I looked up at them. I'm like, I'm bleeding. And that is when it felt like an episode of ER or something, where they're rushing me down the hallway, and the nurse was talking about how my lips were really blue, and I was like, I'm really cold. So at that point I was like really starting to die, and I had started to pass out too in the ambulance, and they explained to me like, this is why we can't put you to sleep, because I was at one point like, please put me to sleep, I don't want to feel this anymore. Like they like had to cut my belly button open and make me drink this gross drink to try to see if I had internal bleeding. And so I could literally feel like this tube jabbing my stomach, and the woman putting a catheter in me, and them trying to staple all these wounds up. And it was just pretty horrible, to say the least. But they did finally put me to sleep, and then I woke up on life support, and it was unclear if I would live for a few days. But I'm a fighter and I'm a survivor, and I don't know, I'm here, I want to say, because I fought to be here, as well as everyone that helped and took care of me. And so it was after that I felt not treated so well from like nurses and other hospital staff.
And what happened? Why did you feel that way?
So I was on morphine, right, during the time I was on life support. And when I got taken off of morphine, I just felt like I could feel everything. I was in so much pain, like my entire body felt like it was on fire, just constantly. Right. And I guess they gave me something called Demerol, and it was a Demerol drip, and I had like this little button. But I kept trying to tell them, like, I don't think this is working. I am in so much pain. And I just felt like they kept just brushing me off. You're getting as much as you can. We can't put you back on morphine because we'd have to put you back on life support. And I had a chest tube. My spleen had to be removed. I had a tube coming out of my pancreas. I had, like I said, staples going all the way up and down my trunk. I had staples all over my body. And just the fact of getting blood, like I had to receive blood before my second surgery to fix my hand and my leg. And that was so incredibly painful. Just them moving me, just even the slightest, trying to change my sheets was so incredibly painful. And I was never listened to or taken seriously, that I was just in so much pain. And I was just sweating profusely. At one point, I got a yeast infection so bad, it was all the way down to my knees. And that's just, to me, like, that's a sign of they're not taking care of me. But I know I'm jumping around, but I was
okay. You said that you felt like they ignored your complaints about pain, right?
Or my pleas, really. I was basically.
And
I'm a very nice person. I'm from a Southern family, right? We're taught to be very polite, and whether that's good or bad, but I never want to be demanding, but I was just like, I had just gone through this horrid event and was still surviving, trying to fight for my life while also just being in so much pain. And I just felt like they didn't believe me or listen to me. And then one of the night nurses at one point was, I know your history of bulimia, so we need to get you to eat. But I was just like, what does that have to do with this? Like, I just didn't understand the connection of they're bringing up my past depression and bulimia in regards to me trying to eat like a plate of food. Like, I'm just like, I can't physically do this right now. And so I just felt like very little to no compassion. And some of my friends and family noticed it too. Like, I only got like 3 30-minute visits a day in the ICU, but I had people comment that they noticed the nurses were mean to me, basically. And
well, why do you think that was? I mean, these were female nurses, right?
They were, yeah. So later on, when I got out of the hospital, a couple months later, I went to see a doctor that asked me if I wanted my medical records. And I was like, sure. And for better or worse, I read them, and so I ended up seeing a psychiatrist who was male, and I saw his report, and I was so livid reading what they said about me. They said that I was drug seeking, that I acted bizarre, and just the words they used were so hateful, I felt like, and I felt like, so they just thought that I was someone who tried to do this to me, because the psychiatrist, when he interviewed me, asked if I had done this to myself. And I was like, what are you talking about?
How could you physically do that to yourself?
I have no idea. And even later on, the police, it kept insisting that people do this kind of stuff to themselves. And I was like, there's no way. There's absolutely no way, unless you're completely out of your mind. And I'm a very smart person. I'm like, I don't know. It was just, I don't know if the police convinced them. And this is where it gets hard for me. I understand people have to do their jobs and investigate. And there are people that drug seek. I do understand that. But the amount of injuries I sustained and the state I was in, how could I possibly be drug seeking? It was just so ludicrous to me. And the idea that I was stabbed all over my body, including my leg. And as a dancer, like, that's something I would never do any of this anyways. But just, I was like, look at the facts, dude. I felt like nobody looked at my medical records. Like, I constantly had to tell people, once I got out of the ICU into the step down ICU, I had to tell them what happened, like, over and over again.
Do you think this was a isolated incident from this one hospital, or do you think this is something that just happens commonly?
Unfortunately, I think it happens commonly. I don't want to say every time or to everyone, but I know that I'm not an expert in statistics whatsoever, but I have read that especially women of color don't get listened to, especially about pain. And then it creates this kind of, so people don't want to speak up. It creates this whole cyclical thing of, well, if no one's going to listen to me or believe me, then why would I speak up? And then we're not getting the proper treatment we need. And in my case, I did speak up, and I still didn't get the proper treatment I needed. So it depends on, I think, how your life goes, but I think it can create people, women especially, that just don't speak up anymore for themselves or advocate for themselves anymore. And then they're not getting the proper treatment. I do think that's becomes a very common thing.
Yeah, I read some statistics about this. I can't remember specifically, but the bottom line was that a lot of hospital workers, healthcare workers, typically just believe that women exaggerate their pain,
Yes, exactly.
that they don't tolerate pain the way men do,
Which is
and
a load of
that
crap, in my opinion, to
yeah.
be honest.
But that seems to be there are studies that show this,
Yeah. And it's
and that's just
pervasive.
it's hard to believe because that would have consequences in terms of your eventual outcome.
Yeah. I write specifically about what's worse, getting attacked or not being believed. Because
Yeah,
they both did, I feel equal amounts of trauma that that I still am working through. All these years later, it never leaves you completely. And one of the things that I do talk about is advocating for yourself and how important it is to not, even if you have to go to 20 different doctors, it's not fun. It's very frustrating. It can be very disheartening. But you are worth it. You are worth advocating. And that's anyone and everyone. I don't want to make that a gender bias thing.
of
But
course.
yeah, at one point, I will say one of the things that really sticks out to me is I was put in an isolated room that was normally for children. And it wasn't my choice. That's where I was put. I guess that's where they had room. And
Uh-huh.
that one nurse that was, I will say the worst, she looked at me and she said, "We need to move you because we need this room for people who really deserve it, who really need it." Yeah, who deserve it. She used that word. And I know memory is faulty, but that really has stuck with me for my entire life. I deserve it. Someone who deserves it.
What do you have to do to deserve it?
Exactly. And even if someone is just struggling through something with mental health, it doesn't mean they don't deserve it. It doesn't mean they don't deserve compassion and care. And this was not what happened to me. And it seems so obvious to me, but I was just treated.
Let me get this right. So you go in with these horrific injuries from this attack,
Mm,
and because you had a record of suffering from depression and bulimia, the healthcare workers in the hospital focused on those things really even more than the injuries that you encountered, that you suffered.
that's how it definitely felt to me. The first time I was sat up and put in a chair, I literally just shook and drooled the whole time because my body had been through so much and I'd been flat for, I don't know, about a week.
Uh-huh.
And so the first time they're sitting me up, and I understand that you need to get me sitting up, you need to get me moving. I do understand these things, but to
Sure.
sit me down and then sit a plate of chicken and noodles and stuff in front of me as I'm literally shaking and drooling and then being chastised for not eating it. You know what I mean? I'm just kind of, I can't, this is
Yeah.
why I physically cannot do this right now. I would love to eat that. I
Yeah.
don't know, but it's had nothing to do
Yeah.
with my depression or my eating disorder. In that moment, I wanted to heal and get out of there too, but
Oh, sure.
your body can only heal so quickly. And trust me, I
Yeah.
was determined. But
Tell me about this male nurse. What was that experience
so
about?
that I was, like I said, I was hospitalized for depression when I was 19, and this is tricky too. Like it's a very vulnerable state to be in because you're in this hospital and I'm seeing as a 19-year-old people with very severe mental illnesses, which has allowed me to have a different perspective clearly, but it's also was fairly scary to be in this very chaotic kind of environment. But so this male nurse started talking about me. I was 19 and I'll just admit I was still a virgin at that point in my life. And there was another patient there who was like me. He was depressed, very nice, and I saw him maybe as a father figure in a way. Again, being so young, and so I trusted him to. We just talked, and that's what you naturally do, right? When you're in that kind of environment, you're with people who can relate to you. But he came to me at one point and said, "I need you to be careful around this nurse because he's been talking about you and how he basically would like to do certain things with you." And he even told him that, so the patient told the nurse, "Look, she's a virgin, like maybe lay off of that." And he's like, "I can show her how it's done." So these kind of discussions are going on behind my back when I'm in an incredibly vulnerable state by a male nurse. And then that patient got discharged a few days before me. And I remember being sad like, oh, here's an advocator for me more than any staff member. Right? And I woke up, thank God this was a day or two before I got discharged. I was sleeping, and like I started to open my eyes, and I saw him standing a few feet away from me, and he leaned towards me and went, "You're so pretty when you're sleeping," and then walked away. And I just was stunned, and I just felt so unsafe and shocked. But then I'm thinking, who can I even tell? Who's going to believe me? I'm in this very vulnerable place where they already think that I'm.
I think you're crazy.
Exactly. And I'm far from it. I'm depressed. I'm not crazy. And it was just, I can't help but wonder if I'd been there a few more days, what would have happened. And it's so horrifying.
So what happened to the guy? Did you ever complain about him? Did you file any charges against him?
I didn't, and I wish I had. But again, especially when you're young, I will say as a young woman, I just got the hell out of there and didn't look back. But now I do wonder, could I have prevented somebody else from getting assaulted? I don't know. I have no idea. But it does make me feel shame in a way that I didn't speak up or say anything.
Yeah.
It's hard when you're that young and you're that vulnerable. And I just felt I could have spoken up and no one would listen to me, which is probably what would have happened, unfortunately. But that was horrifying. And that still sticks with me.
What do you think some of the implications are from women not being believed when they are suffering from a traumatic illness or incident like you suffered from? What are the consequences of not taking proper action?
I think it can be many and endless. I think it affects not only how we see ourselves and how we feel about ourselves, which affects how we move through our day, and then the relationships that we can develop and encounter. I think it can very possibly lead to abusive type of situations because we feel that we don't deserve care. We don't deserve to be listened to. No one's going to listen to us anyway. And it literally affects anything and everything, and how you move about the world and how you see the world and how you see yourself in it. Because it creates this huge lack of self-esteem, lack of self-worth. And then you get judgments from other people layered on top of that, and they keep growing. You're just lazy, you're making excuses, you aren't trying hard enough. And that just adds on to that kind of pile of shame and getting just deeper and deeper into a hole that you just can't see your way out of.
That's on top of the fact that if they don't believe you, you may not get the treatment you need to get.
Absolutely. I think it can lead to people dying, and has. From what I have read, again, I don't want to profess to be an expert, but I know there are women that end up dying. They lose their life because they're not getting the care they need. Not just how the people that do survive it, how they live, but it can also literally end your life. And that's horrifying.
Okay, so you've got this degree in fine arts from the University of Florida, and you've been a dancer and an actor in your career. What are your plans now going forward?
We talked a little earlier, and it was off the show, but we were both kind of creators, right? I'm a creative person, and I know that I am at my best, and I feel my best when I'm creating. COVID, like for everyone, did a number, and I don't want to. Thankfully, I had my health, but I don't have a spleen, so I definitely just stayed in my house for 8 months because I just didn't know how that would affect me.
Sure.
But I performed a couple months before the lockdown, and now I do feel I'm in this hard spot where I'm still trying to find my way, but I chose to use my creativity in a different way during COVID. I wrote and published this book, and I also just produced and directed and acted in a short film that I had written also during COVID. I do all and my next project in my mind is to do a dance on film, but I'll admit that I haven't been in the studio. So I need to do a lot of work to get myself back into shape for that, which I'm like, I do. And the older I get, the harder that gets too. But so it's just trying to focus on these things that I can create and in hopes that it speaks to someone else. One of the ways I healed through this, and this was one of the dances I performed a couple months before COVID, was about PTSD. So I was able to create this solo in hopes to help other people either understand it better or to allow them to be seen and to feel some feelings that perhaps they had been disconnected from. So that's, to me, art is that's what it's for. That's what it does.
Sure.
Storytelling, right, is to help people not feel alone and to be
seen. Yeah. You want to walk us through your book a little bit? Talk to us about what you've got there.
Sure. It's definitely a book that when I wrote it, I just wrote each chapter independently of each other. So I have a very non-traditional way that I feel like I wrote it. I just knew that this is how I wanted to open the book. The very first chapter opens, and I wrote it in that first person perspective because I thought that might be a unique way to go about writing some of this material, is when I woke up on life support. It was a very brief moment in time, but a very impactful moment in time for me. And so I wrote it, what I was feeling, what I was experiencing, again, from that first person perspective. And then it jumps to when I make sure to put, so I will say, please read the title of each chapter because it gives you an indication of when this time period is. My mother-in-law, who taught English for 30 years, told me, she read it 3 times. And she said, well, I was lost the first time I read it, but I also, and I said, the time periods are in each title. She's why I ignored those. So I was like, okay, that's important. So just moving forward, just a little pro tip is to definitely read those titles, right? Because that's kind of how my brain works. And it's been such a long span of time. So I wrote some parts from that first person perspective. And then I wrote other parts from the present day. Right. And I also wanted to include my feelings as I wrote the book, which I think is not common, but I literally wrote, I want to erase this. I want to take this back. I don't want to publish this. I feel embarrassed or ashamed about this still. But in order to tell my story fully and truthfully, I know I have to include it. So it's even including those feelings I had of being vulnerable and the fears I had of, I wasn't believed by many influential people. So I setting myself up for the same kind of treatment. And so I'm very candid about that as I'm writing. What turns me off personally, if someone's, I used to live in my car and now I'm a millionaire and you can do it too. It's just like they gloss over the difficulties. And that's amazing. It's an amazing story. And if it inspires somebody, that's wonderful. But for me, I didn't want to pretend that every day is magical and amazing and perfect, because it's not. It's still a struggle. But that's okay. There's still something beautiful about that. Without the dark, we can't experience the light. And it's not fun. It's not enjoyable. But I also really wanted to be truthful about that.
Okay. It sounds like a fascinating book. Where can people find it?
They can find it on Amazon currently. I'm looking into some other retailers as well, but that was the way I went initially. So it's on Amazon. It's on paperback, hardback, and Kindle. And the 25th anniversary of my attack will be in May this year. So my goal is to do an audiobook and have it published by then.
25th anniversary.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Let's see. It happened when you were 21. Mm-hmm. So that makes you 46?
I will be 46 in March, yeah.
Okay. I will say this to you, ladies and gentlemen, who are simply listening and not looking at the video version. This woman doesn't look like she's 46. She looks like she's about 30.
Thank you.
Oh, so anyway. Got anything else you want to tell us about?
I think just, again, my hope is that no matter what, you're worth advocating for yourself. You really are. And I know I completely understand the struggle. It is not fun. It can be very difficult and very disheartening, but please don't give up on yourself. And I also really believe in inner child work. I think that's so important. We all have a wounded inner child, but we also all have a magical inner child. And so maybe take some time to meet up with those two children that we all have inside of us, because I think that can bring a lot of healing and a lot of magic in our lives always. So inner child work, I think, is hugely important, but also really advocating for yourself. I just cannot stress that enough. You are worth it, and please do it.
Okay, Lynn. Thank you so much for being with us on Lean to the Left. I really appreciate it.
No, thank you so much.
I'm sorry you had to go through what you went through, but glad you got it together and did this book, and hopefully it'll help not just you, but other people.
Truly hope that.
Okay, guys, thanks for hanging with us. We need to take a quick break here, but I'll be right back with some closing comments in just a second. Hey, guys, thanks for listening. Hope you enjoyed this podcast and that you'll come back on a regular basis and check out our interviews with guests on topics that I hope you find interesting, entertaining, and enlightening. Our episodes stream weekly, every Monday. Let your friends know about this podcast and take a minute to subscribe. Just go to podcast.leantotheleft.net to subscribe, check out the upcoming interview schedule, and listen to all of our episodes. And follow us on social media. Facebook at the Lean to the Left Podcast, Twitter at Lean to the Left 1, Instagram at @BobGaddy_Lean to the Left, and TikTok at Lean to the Left. And you can watch the episodes at YouTube at Lean to the Left. And don't forget to visit our blog site, leantotheleft.net, where you'll find commentary on the news by some excellent writers with progressive perspectives on a whole range of topics. You can sign up as a member there, and of course, it's all free. Now, this is Bob Gaddy signing off for Lean to the Left. Thanks for sharing your time with us.